Wow. All right, friends, we have Marcia Montenegro with us. I'm going to let her talk a little bit about her background and just kind of her relevance to this topic. I was telling her it seems like we only talk around this time of the year because kind of the subject matter, but she's been a good friend of ours for years and years and years from our seminary days. So she's the most knowledgeable person I know on this topic, just a brilliant source of wealth. So we're going to turn it to her, and she's going to go for 50 minutes or so, and then we'll do some Q&A if you guys want to ask questions. So with that said, Marcia, you can kind of give a little intro of who you are and just jump right into it.
Okay, great. Thanks, Devin. Yes, hi, everybody. I'm so glad that I have this opportunity to talk to you. And my background is that I was in what's called the New Age for a good 20 years or more, very involved in Eastern religions, but also in various aspects of the occult, such as contact with the dead, numerology. I took a course in palm reading. I took past life regression. I believed in reincarnation very strongly, in fact. And I was always interested in astrology, and I became a professional astrologer and practiced as a professional astrologer. Was president of the Astrological Society. I was on the board of astrology examiners, which in the city of Atlanta, Georgia, which is where I was when all this was going on. They actually have it set up so that you can practice legally in the city limits if you have a business license. But to qualify for the business license, you have to show you know astrology, so you have to take a test. And they had a 7-hour exam set up there, which I had to take. And then when I was on the board, I administered it. Me and 3 other people or 2 other people, we were on the committee, administered that test and graded it every year for 4 years when I was on there, and I was chairperson the last 3 of those 4 years. And I taught astrology. So I have a lot of experience with astrology, but as an astrologer, I had clients, of course, who were all over, there were psychics, they were tarot card readers, and a lot of my clients were Wiccans and witches. So I knew that community, or actually there was more than one witch, Wiccan, pagan community in Atlanta at the time. I knew people from 5 different groups. And since I did astrology for a lot of them, I actually became friends with some of them and had experiences with them outside of being their astrologer. Although I did not become a Wiccan, but I also heard a lot about, their life when they were my clients. So I had a lot of interaction with that community as well. And God intervened in my life in a very dramatic way, although it was over a period of time. It wasn't like one sudden event. It was a series of things that happened over a period of several months. And, I would say, 7-8 months or something like that. And during that time, God was drawing me to Christ, although I was not aware of that at all. That was not, that just would not, that if anyone had told me that was what was happening, I would have argued with them. I would have said, no way, I'm not going to become a Christian. That's not what's going on. But I didn't understand what was going on. But anyway, I ended up with me turning my life over to Christ. And of course, at that point, which I remember very vividly, everything changed. I knew I had been on a wrong path, that I had believed in a wrong God. I had the wrong Jesus, and my life was headed away from God, not towards God. And so, my whole life changed, of course. And my story is, it's in a lot of places. It's on my website, which I want to give before I forget, christiananswersforthenewage.org. I have a lot of articles on there. So go to the articles page and you can look and see all the topics that I have there. I've been writing articles for a long time for that website. So I have articles on psychics, on astrology, on witchcraft, on New Age books, et cetera, et cetera. And so that is one place and my story is there. But I've also given my testimony in various interviews, podcasts, and video interviews. And if you just Google, that should come up. That should come up like if you do something like From Astrology to Christ or something like that. Also on my website, if you go to the schedule page, I put things down there that are scheduled. And when I've done a podcast or interview and I have the link is put there. My webmaster puts it there for me. So certainly on recent shows, you should still be able to get that. On some of the real older shows, I don't know, but the recent shows in the last several months should be there. So if you want to, watch my story on a video interview or something, you should be able to find it. But I'm not going to go into that tonight because really, to do it justice, I would want a good 20 minutes for it. So I summarized it for you and told you where you can find it. But I can answer questions about it at the end if you have questions about it. I don't mind, giving you more information on it. So having been a professional astrologer and been involved in all of these New Age and occult things, the Lord eventually called me to full-time ministry. And it happened before 1998 when he called me and I was praying about it, but it actually began officially in 1998. So I've been doing this full-time for 23 years. I operate as a missionary. I'm under a mission agency and I have several churches and individuals that support me monthly. So I'm grateful to the Lord for all of that, for allowing me to do this work. And so tonight, I'm going to talk about the occult and what it is. I am going to go into Wicca and witchcraft next week because Devin and Melissa have kindly given me 2 weeks to speak, 2 sessions. So I'm going to do Wicca and witchcraft next week. And I'm glad I'm going to have 2 times because it would be hard to fit it all into one talk. So the occult, I define as a set of practices linked to different belief systems. So I don't define the occult as a religion. I define it as a set of practices, but these practices are linked to spiritual beliefs. And so you can find them in different spiritual beliefs, or you can find people who do them saying what their beliefs are, and it's not going to be the same as somebody else. And the occult can be divided up into 3 areas: divination, spirit contact, and sorcery. And it would be good for you to know that all of the practices of the occult are listed in Deuteronomy 18, verses 10 and 11. And so that passage has a complete list. Now, it doesn't list all variations of the occult, but it lists all the occult practices, the categories such as contacting the dead, casting a spell, reading omens, doing divination, and witchcraft is usually mentioned. And because of the Hebrew language not really being easily translated all the time one-on-one into English, the Hebrew terms, were their own terms. And when the Bible was written, those terms describe certain practices at that time, but the translation of them is done with the modern understanding of what it is. So, for example, one of the words sounds like a whispering. It sounds like somebody when you say the word, it sounds like a whispering, like you're whispering. And that word is used for doing magical chants. So that word is sometimes translated as witchcraft, sometimes as divination. So what I'm trying to explain here is that these words are different in some of the English Bibles. So if you're reading the King James and you read those two verses, some of the terms are not going to be the same as if you're reading the New American Standard or the ESV. You know, they may all have some differences, but they're all describing the same thing. And some of these words, like witchcraft, did not exist in the Hebrew language because that word just didn't exist. That concept wasn't there, but practicing the occult was there. And so when you see English Bibles use the word witchcraft, it's usually based on a Hebrew word that means either bringing up the dead or doing some form of divination. So I just, it's good to know all that ahead of time because I have come across some people who do witchcraft, who know that there is no Hebrew word for witchcraft. So they will say, well, there's no Hebrew word for witchcraft, so actually it's not forbidden because there is no Hebrew word for it. So it's good to understand that even though the word didn't exist, the practices did. And so that's what we need to look at, is what are the practices describing. So divination is what a lot of people call fortune telling, which I don't think is a very good word, but that's the word you usually hear. Divination means that you're divining something. You are getting information from what is considered to be a divine source. And the reason it's divine is because these are practices that were done by people who had false gods, who worshiped false gods. And this is how they thought they were getting information or guidance from their gods. This was their communication with their gods, or how they read the answers that they thought they would get from these gods. So that's why the word is divination. So getting information from some kind of source. Now, the way I would say it today is it's getting information either from what is thought to be a supernatural source or through a supernatural method, or it's reading a hidden meaning in something. So divination can cover all of that. So for example, getting it from a supernatural source would be, let's say, like a psychic who believes she or he is getting their information. They might be just sitting there kind of going into an altered state and thinking that they're accessing the information from something called the Akashic record. Okay, something that I can tell you more about if you want to know, but it's a common concept in the New Age and the occult, the Akashic record. Or they may think that their guide is giving them the information, or they may use something to focus on. And that's what crystal balls, when you see these, usually that's like cartoons you see in magazines or newspapers, where you have a woman with a turban and she's looking into a crystal ball and she's saying something to somebody. Okay, what the crystal ball is for focus. So it's not that the crystal ball is actually going to magically have something in it to give you the information, but by focusing on it, then you see what you're supposed to see. So that's the idea. That's divination too. And those are all like using supernatural or thinking you're getting a supernatural means or source. Then reading a hidden meaning is something I'm sure you all have heard of, tarot cards with images on them. And the tarot card reader lays down the cards in a certain pattern and looks at the images that come up for you and interprets them as something about your life, either past, present, or future, or all three. So that they're reading a hidden meaning into those pictures. The same thing with palm reading. So your hand has these lines on them. And really, I mean, if you look at your hand, I mean, what is it? Is it saying anything to you? No, it's just a bunch of lines. It doesn't mean anything. But for the palm reader, this all has meaning. For the astrologer, the position of the planets and the sun and moon at the time of your birth all have a meaning and are supposed to be a blueprint for your life. So those are all, numerology is reading meanings into numbers. So there's the idea of a hidden meaning there. So whenever you come across something that's supposed to have a hidden meaning like that, you're probably dealing with something from the occult. Even if it isn't called the occult, it can still be occultic. It can be an occultic thing. So it's something that is absolutely foreign to the Bible. God's word does not have hidden meanings in it. It doesn't have a code that we have to figure out. Probably most of you are too young to remember, but there was a big fad like 20 years ago or so on the Bible code books. And all these people were writing books about the Bible codes and how the Bible had these secret hidden codes. and these books were selling very well. Even Christians were buying them. Now, some of the writers were not Christians, but some of them were. And a lot of people believed this. But this goes against the character of God, because God does not try to trick us with little hidden meanings in things. And in fact, Jesus said in the Gospel of John, I think it's chapter 18, it's either chapter 18 or chapter 20, Jesus said, I taught nothing in secret. Jesus wasn't going around with secret teachings. Secret teachings is a hallmark of the occult and of Gnosticism. This is not a biblical quality or trait. So keep that in mind. That will help you if you come across somebody or a book or something that tries to tell you about a hidden meaning, and maybe, oh, Mary's name has a hidden meaning. Or did you know the name of Jesus has a hidden meaning in it, or something like that? Believe me, I've seen a lot of that kind of stuff, and it's out there. So that's all esoteric occult stuff. So divination is probably the biggest area of the occult that most people are familiar with. And I do have an article on divination on my website, and I give a lot of examples. Do you know, just opening a book up, you get a book and you think, I need an answer, I don't know what to do. Should I go to Italy on my vacation or not? And you open it up at random and read something, you think you're going to get the message. That's called bibliomancy. And people do that with the Bible. So they're like, oh, I don't know. I need guidance from God on, should I take that new job or not? And then they just open the Bible and read a verse at random, and they think that's going to give them, and then they see something and they interpret it as their answer. That's really a form of divination. So that's not reading the Bible. So some of these things can look innocent, but they're not. That's one of the things about the occult. It can look innocent. So that's divination. And like I said, I have an article. Then the other one is spirit contact, which is, it's kind of obvious. It's contacting a disembodied entity, whether you think it's a dead person, an alien, an angel, an ascended master. In some areas of the New Age, they believe in ascended masters, these evolved people who have gone on to these other planes of existence. Or angel, contacting an angel is also spirit contact. Angels are spirits. So we are not supposed to contact angels. And there's not a single case in the Bible where anybody contacts an angel. Wow. Angels contact people, but there isn't anywhere where people contact angels, initiate the contact. And as far as the angels who serve God go, they go at God's direction. God is the one who sends them for whatever purpose he has, to give a message to someone, to warn someone, like when, Joseph was told to go away with Mary, and then he was told when he could come back. Or Peter was let out of a prison by an angel. But these angels, everything they did was because of what God told them, not anything that a man or woman asked them to do, because we don't make requests of angels. So God, that's God's area. So the only angels that anybody will contact And people do think there are these guardian angel workshops and angel workshops where people go and they learn supposedly how to contact their angel. The only angels that are going to respond are going to be fallen angels,
Wow.
the angels who rebelled with Satan. That's who's going to answer. And believe me, they want to answer because they want to deceive you. And they can seem like a very helpful angel. Now, I know this may sound like fantasy to some of you, but I had spirit guides. And everybody in the New Age has spirit guides, and everybody who practices the occult has spirit guides. And actually, this is a very known thing. I mean, my friends and I would sometimes talk about our guides. This was just a commonly accepted thing, and I definitely had spirit guides. Now, who were these guides? I thought that they were people who had lived many, many lives and had spiritually evolved to a point where they were so advanced, spiritually advanced, that they could be a teacher for people on earth. That's what I thought. But of course, these guides were nothing more than fallen angels. And there are lots of people in the New Age who I've heard stories from and read stories from or seen them, you know, on YouTube talk about their guides, because this is a real thing. This really does exist. So that's another thing that goes on in the occult, and both the occult and the New Age. So spirit contact is a byproduct of practicing the occult, because whether you want to do spirit contact or not, you will, because if you're involved in it, you will get spirit guides. And that it just happens. So that's a byproduct of doing that kind of practice. So spirit contact is kind of obvious. Of course, you have a very common one in our country, which is the idea of contacting the dead. And we have all these movies and TV shows all about that. We've had so many of them. You have shows like the haunted, you know, shows about haunted places, and they go in with cameras and they, you know, supposedly they're there to track, you know, ghost activity. And, you know, and so, you know, there might be noises or they see something and they're like, oh yes, you know, there's always some story attached to it. That involves a ghost, one or more ghosts that are like supposedly haunting the place. So you have the haunted house thing. And of course, this time of year, that's a huge theme that you run into everywhere. So here's what I want to say about ghosts. I actually have an article on ghosts on my website that I just posted on Facebook. Oh, by the way, if you're on Facebook, I have a page called Christian Answers for the New Age, where I post information on the occult and the New Age all the time. So if you want to follow that page, you can see what I'm posting, because I post a lot of stuff that I do not end up having an article on. So some of it I turn into an article for my website, but there's a lot of stuff I post. I post too much stuff to turn it into articles, so I don't have time for that. So I post a lot of information there. Anyway, so ghosts, there is no such thing as a ghost in terms of it being the spirit of a dead person, which in this country, that's what a ghost is. It's supposed to be the spirit of a dead person that you can see or hear, or that is doing things in a house, you know, it's slamming doors or knocking things over, whatever. Okay, there is no such thing as the spirit of a dead person hanging around after they die. When a person dies, they are gone. They are not hanging around, okay? Their soul or spirit, however you want to call it, I think which I think are the same thing, are in one place or the other. And so they're either with Christ, or they're in what I think is some kind of waiting place for unbelievers waiting to be judged on Judgment Day. Now, there are different views on this, and I'm not going to get into that, and it's really a secondary issue. But the important thing is, and I think all Christians would agree on this, you don't hang around after you die. You're just not here. So when people say they see a ghost or hear a ghost, which is a very common story that we hear all the time, there's one of 3 or 4 things happening. Number one, they're making it up, which is you know, very possible. Number two, especially if they're doing a TV show in a haunted house. Number two, it's their imagination. Okay, or some kind of hallucination if they're taking a drug or something. Number three, there's a natural cause. And I think actually that's probably the most common thing. That may be an imagination. There's some kind of natural cause. You know, if the door slams suddenly, it isn't a ghost. There's some kind of natural, logical explanation for it. I think that's true for a lot of these cases. And the fourth possibility, and I think this happens, but I think it's the least likely, is a demonic disturbance. Now, I think when this happens, it's usually around people who are practicing the occult or getting into it, or they're getting into some kind of teaching that opens them up to the idea of ghosts or dead people or something like that. When you're open to it, then I think it's possible that those things happen because it seduces you into getting interested in it. Most people get interested in some way. And I'm talking here mainly about non-Christians, although a lot of Christians think that a house can be haunted, but if they think that, they're not thinking biblically. So what I often tell Christians, if they tell me that, you know, oh, they're in this house and they found out somebody died in it or was killed in it, and now they hear some strange noises or something, you know, is it a demon? Or, well, you know, I give them what I'm just told you, the four possibilities. And then I say, you know, okay, it's probably a natural cause, but if it's a demon, so what? Like, who cares? You know, I'm really, as a Christian, you should not be afraid of that. I don't mean that you should laugh at it or think it's not important, but you shouldn't be afraid of it. I mean, Jesus has more power than any demon or certainly than Satan. I mean, we know that as a Christian. So there's no reason to be scared about it. And I usually say, I think if you ignore it, it'll go away. And the more interest you give it, the more it's going to happen if it's really demonic, because you'll show interest and then you just feed it. I think you just feed it if you're showing interest in it or showing fear or something. So ignore it. Anyway, that's, you know, not the usual thing for most Christians, but I get those stories often enough that I wanted to say something. For the non-Christian, I usually want to know, if I'm talking to them, you know, I want to know if they've been involved in anything. Have they gone to a psychic? Have they had tarot cards read for them? Have they gone to an astrologer? Are they involved in witchcraft? Or, you know, I go through things to find out, and often, and usually they are. There's something going on there that they're involved in, or they've shown a strong interest in one of those things, gotten books on it, or they're reading about it on the internet, or they're talking to somebody about it. If you do that, then you may attract that activity. So usually if there's demonic activity, there's a reason for it. It's not random. It's not a random thing. And it's not just for some other kind of purpose. It's usually because there's an interest or something. So anyway, so that's about ghosts. So all of these, like ghost tours and, you know, going somewhere in these older cities, that have been around for a while and have real old buildings in them, they always have ghost tours, you know, like Savannah, Georgia, or Charleston, South Carolina, or, you know, just all over the place. There's ghost tours, and supposedly, you know, this place will be haunted and they'll tell you a story and all of that. Well, just, you know, just, it's not true. So, so much for that. So that's what I have to say about ghosts. So spirit contact is extremely dangerous, though. I do want to say, purposely trying to contact a disembodied entity is probably the most dangerous thing you can do in the occult. It's not that the other things aren't dangerous, but this is the most directly dangerous, because you are just putting yourself out there and saying, I'm ready for contact. And you may think it's for something good, like, oh, it's a good angel. I'm calling on my guardian angel. But if you get a response that's not going to be your guardian angel or going to be a good angel, it's going to be a fallen angel that will try to deceive you. So this is really one of the most dangerous things that can be done. So going to a seance is very dangerous. A seance is where people gather around, and the main person there, who's usually a medium or a medium psychic, will try to call on a dead person or dead people to appear. I've been in seances, and things do happen in them that I think are supernatural, but they're demonic. So, don't ever go to a seance. Don't think you can go just for fun or entertainment or just out of curiosity. Don't do it. I wouldn't go to a seance. And this is my area that I talk and write about and that I've been in, and I wouldn't go to one. Even and don't use the excuse, I'm going to go there to pray. Nope, not a good idea. Don't do it. Now, if you want to go talk to a medium and pray with her, I don't mean pay her to talk, consult her, but if you know somebody who does this kind of thing, I don't think we should be afraid of the people who do it. There's no reason to be afraid. If you know somebody who is a psychic or a medium or a witch or whatever, you don't need to be afraid of them. There's nothing dangerous about talking to them, having lunch with them or whatever. That's fine. Totally do that. If you feel that the Lord might be able to use you in a conversation or friendship with them. So there's no need to fear. So there's a distinction between, knowing the person and talking to the person and then being involved in the activity or being somewhere where this activity is happening. That's what I'm warning about. Don't do that. Don't go to a place where they're going to do a ritual, okay, like a Wiccan ritual or any kind of occult ritual. Just don't do it. The Ouija board, which is sold as a game by Parker Brothers, was originally invented by a man who was a spiritualist who believed in contacting the dead. And the Ouija board he had an early version of it, then the modern version that we know of from Parker Brothers came about later. And Ouija means yes in French, and ja means yes in German. So it's yes, yes. It's invitation to spirit to contact with the dead. So a Ouija board really isn't a game, and I do think they can be dangerous, and I would not fool with one at all. All right, let me move on to the third category, sorcery. I don't know how long I've been talking. Oh, good. I think I'm right on time here. Sorcery is, the way I define sorcery is the use of either what you believe is a supernatural power that you have or calling on a supernatural power, and then using a tool or some kind of ritual or both in order to bring something into reality. So you're trying to make something come into reality that does not exist, whatever that might be. It might be an object, like, you want to do a sorcery ritual in order to bring about a new car, or that's not usually what in sorcery they do it for, but there's a lot of spirit contact in sorcery. Sorcery is very dangerous. So also, I want to say that people who do sorcery usually don't call it that. They call it magic. They call it ceremonial magic is a thing. So ceremonial magic is sorcery, and it's done according to certain prescribed steps. And sometimes it's called ritual magic. And these terms can vary from person to person. There's no like a book that says, okay, this is what it is. And so you call it this. It kind of depends on the people who are doing it and how they understand it. So some people who do this might call it ritual magic. Some might call it ceremonial magic. I have talked to, interestingly enough, the main people I have talked to who do ceremonial magic have been teenage boys, like around age 15. They're the ones that are very drawn to this because actually they believe that it's dangerous. They know that it's dangerous, and that attracts them because I guess it's a macho thing. It's not, I don't understand being attracted to danger, but for them, that's one of the appeals of it. So they want to see, I guess, if they can withstand this and they can deal with the danger and overcome it. So that's an area that is probably the least, something that people know very little about in our culture. It's something that you don't hear about as much. And you know, so there's not a lot of information on it. It's very secretive too. People who do this, they're very secretive about it. So there's not a lot of information out there. I do want to say that sorcery can appear in innocent ways. And I'm going to tell you one right now that might surprise you, maybe not. Energy healing. I consider energy healing a form of sorcery. Now, energy healing is very, very big in the New Age. New Agers have a different worldview from people in the occult. The occult worldview and the New Age view are different. But people in the New Age practice the occult. Like I was a New Ager, but I was an astrologer. I practiced astrology, which is an occult practice. But my worldview was New Age. So you also have overlaps too. So there's that. And I'm going to go into that more next week when I talk about Wicca and witchcraft, because there's a certain worldview with that. And it can be compatible with the New Age, and some people in Wicca and witchcraft have a New Age worldview, but the actual worldview usually of Wicca and witchcraft is not the same as the New Age worldview. So there's a difference there. So anyway, so what, you know, I forgot what I was saying. What was I saying, Devin? I was making a point about something.
Energy healing, something.
Yes, energy healing. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, this happens to me all the time. Energy healing, which is unfortunately becoming mainstream. One of the most popular ones is called Reiki, R-E-I-K-I. And this actually goes back to a man in Japan who was Buddhist, but it's not really a Buddhist type thing. It probably is linked more to Shintoism and to animism. So it's not really Buddhist, although he was a Buddhist. So Reiki is energy healing, where you hold your hands over certain parts of the body and you don't touch it. And the Reiki healer believes that they are channeling healing energy from the universe into the area of your body. And your body has this intelligence so that it will know where to put the healing energy. This is what I talked to some Reiki healers at a New Age fair several years ago, and this is what they told me. I've also had a lot of Christians who used to be Reiki healers tell me this. I do have an article on Reiki on my website, but there are lots of other kinds of energy healing. And there are different names like hands of light, healing touch. Ironically enough, is actually energy healing, although it doesn't sound like it. Healing hands. There's all kinds of names for these healing things that are energy healing, where they believe that they're putting an energy or transmitting an energy into you, or they're altering your energy. So it's very tricky now because hospitals more and more are using or allowing these kind of practitioners when patients request them. But I think a lot of the nurses do these things, and they do them on patients without telling the patient. Now, I have stories of this. I have anecdotes on it, so I'm not making a scientific claim for that as a fact. I have anecdotes on it though, and I believe it. And I had nurse midwife clients who were witches, who told me when I was an astrologer that when they're with a woman who's giving birth, they will use energy healing on her without telling her. So, you know, it's out there. So what's the problem with energy healing? Well, the problem is that it's a supernatural concept. And this energy is supernatural. It's not natural. It's not natural energy. So even if the person thinks it is, or if they define it that way or tell you it's natural, it's not. It's supernatural. So whenever you're dealing with the supernatural and you're trying to channel or manipulate or direct it, you are dealing with the occult, and you are dealing with sorcery. because you think you're putting yourself in charge of this energy. Okay. Very dangerous. I think it's dangerous for the practitioner. I would not want it done to me. Now, as a Christian, I wouldn't be afraid if I was with somebody and they started, doing it to me, and I thought maybe they were doing energy healing. I wouldn't be afraid, but I would ask them to stop. I would ask them what they were doing. And are you doing energy healing? If they were, I'd say, would you please not do that? And then I would try to use that as a way to talk to them about Christ, if I could. And then I would pray and ask God, I don't want any of that. Whatever that energy was doing, I don't want it. Take it away. So I want to mention that because these things are becoming more mainstream now. People are accepting them because in our culture, we are being because there's no longer a concept of absolute truth. And we're in really a increasingly kind of God. We have gods in our culture, but it's not the biblical God. So it's basically more godless, not in the sense of being atheist, but in the sense of not having the true God. And because of that, there's this opening, all this other stuff comes to fill in, spirit, this new age, occult spirituality just comes swooping into the empty spaces and people are drawn to it. They're drawn to it because it's spiritual and it seems benevolent and it seems helpful. Okay, I'm going to stop to take questions because I think I did my approximately 45 minutes here or so of what I wanted to say. So
great. Thank you so much for sharing there,
Marcia. Sure. That was a kind of a quick overview, actually, because I've done whole talks just on astrology, but
you guys go to our Ratio Christi at Winthrop YouTube page. We did 3 or 4 talks last year, had John on very specific topics. So
yes. So that's there.
If you guys have some questions, just be sure to talk loud so she can hear you. But
yeah, you may have to repeat if I can't hear, and I can't see them, so I don't know if anybody's raising their hand. But please ask questions. I'm setting aside time for questions because I always feel at least one person has one question. So, and probably more than one person. It's just the first person doesn't usually want to go right away.
a little louder.
I can't hear it. You have to say what it is. What's the question, Devin?
All right. So growing up, I heard we talked about numerology earlier.
So numerology.
Growing up, I heard a lot of Christians talking about biblical meanings behind numbers and stuff like that. Does that tie into numerology, or is there actually a Christian component to numbers?
Okay. Yeah, no, that's a good question. Because I didn't cover that at all. Yes, I know about that. And actually there's a couple of ways that is presented, and it's not biblical. None of it is biblical, except in one particular way. So let me discuss that briefly. There's something called gematria, Gematria. And apparently there's this idea, this is where in the Hebrew language, each letter stood for a number. Now, this is what I was even told as a new Christian, and that the writers of the Bible knew that this existed then. But what I discovered years and years later is that gematria comes from the Kabbalah.
Ooh.
And the Kabbalah is not ancient. Now, here's where there's confusion, because a lot of people think the Kabbalah really is ancient. They think it goes back to ancient Judaism. So I think that's why some people think that the writers writing the Old Testament in Hebrew knew about gematria. And there was a form of it with the Greeks, but as far as I know, not at all with the Jewish people or with the Hebrews. But when the Kabbalah came along, like around the 13th, 14th, it was the 13th, 14th, 15th centuries, when various books of the Kabbalah were written, what the Kabbalah claimed, the people who were doing the Kabbalah, writing it out, said that they had discovered ancient manuscripts and they were just writing out what they had discovered. But actually, these manuscripts were not ancient. There's no evidence for them being ancient. The Kabbalah actually began around the 13th century. So, and the gematria is found in the Kabbalah. The Kabbalah teaches that. And the Kabbalah teaches this very mystical understanding of Hebrew. And it talks about how when God spoke the world into existence, the letters of the Hebrew alphabet, each one of them had this like different power. And so they ascribe power to the Hebrew alphabet, which is a very occult, esoteric idea. The Kabbalah is very occult, Gnostic type teaching. So I found out gematria came from the Kabbalah and had nothing to do with the Bible because I was a little confused about it. So first of all, the writers of the books of the Old Testament were not using gematria. They were not using any kind of letter number system. Then there's the idea that some people kind of, I guess they sort of make it up. They see numbers repeated in the Bible, like the number 3, the number 12, the number 40, and they try to give a meaning to it. Now, sometimes they do go too far with this, and they make the number almost like a magical number. So if it's, if Jesus was in the wilderness for 40 days, then I need to fast for 40 days, or I need to pray for 40 days. And that's really kind of taking a number and giving it a meaning it doesn't have, and then doing something with it based on this idea, which is a false idea. The fact that Jesus went in the wilderness for 40 days was because he was undoing what Israel did for 40 years in the wilderness when they disobeyed God. So God goes in the desert Jesus goes in for 40 days, faces the temptations from Satan, and is victorious. Israel failed, Jesus is victorious. So his 40 days in the wilderness was like the 40 years of the Israelites, and that's what that represents. That doesn't mean we're supposed to do anything for 40 days. If you want to do something for 40 days, fine, but don't, say it's because Jesus was in the wilderness for 40 days. So that's what some people do. They take those numbers and try to make them mean something more than they mean. Or 12, there's 12 tribes, there's 12 disciples. So a lot of people think, well, there must be some special meaning to the number 12. Well, if there is a special meaning to the number 12, God doesn't tell us what it is. He doesn't give us a meaning of a number like that. He doesn't say, okay, there's 12 tribes because 12 is a special number that means blah, blah, blah. We just have the narrative that there's 12 tribes. We have the narrative about the 12 apostles, etc. So we can't go beyond that. I don't think we should try to give a meaning to it. We can recognize these numbers are repeated, but I often see people say things like 7 is the number of completion. I see that. I see this all the time, and I'm like, why? Why is it the number of completion? Well, because God made the world, and he actually made it in 6 days, and he rested on the 7th. But that doesn't mean it's a number of completion. I think some of the Jews thought it was, because in the New Testament, there's some places where it appears that was their idea. Yeah. But that doesn't mean it's a biblical idea. So to answer the young lady's question, she could be asking about any of these things, because these are all forms of numerology, and none of them are biblical. Yeah. So yeah, there is no such thing as a biblical numerology, but you will find people who insist there is.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of people just go off the rails when I remember, Dr. Geisler, our professor, would always say that the meaning is not beyond the text or beneath the text or behind the text, but the meaning is in the text.
Exactly.
you start trying to find all these other little things is where you get into. It's almost like, we have enough trouble just understanding the Bible as it is. We don't need to.
Yeah. Right. Don't make it more complicated than it is. Don't give it all these funny little meanings that are going to take you on these trails that will go off and take you. The thing is, they'll take you away from the real meaning of the Bible. They'll
Yeah.
take you away from the real meaning.
Illuminate, theologies in the sky with very little grounding.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
So when talking about like looking into the future and kind of fortune telling situations, would you count like, because I know I have some friends who do practice this and they do like great interpretations to people and such. Because I know in a biblical sense, it's been multiple times in the Bible where that happened.
okay. I can't hear her. Just FYI, I can't hear. I can hear her voice, but I can't hear what she's saying.
Yeah, I'm gonna let her. She's gonna come up and repeat it.
Okay. Okay.
So I know some of the people I know do like dream interpretation of like future and take stuff and symbols from it. So my question is kind of how do you reconcile that too? Because there is points in the Bible where that does happen, where people have dreams that end up coming through the Bible that have been interpreted by kind of gods who you're following through the story.
Are you okay? Are you asking specifically about dreams?
Yeah, like dream interpretations. Is that
Okay. That
Yeah.
come true? Dreams come true? Okay. Yes.
practice that? And then she says that there's some examples in the Bible of that happening.
Okay. 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 Yes. In the Bible, we do have people with dreams. A lot of times they aren't predictive dreams. They're just dreams with a message, and God provides an interpretation. Or it is a dream of the future, but God always provides the interpretation either himself or through somebody else. So for example, Daniel is given the interpretation of the king's dream. The king had a dream, and Daniel is able to even say what the dream was and give the interpretation. Whereas all the wise men, in the court, who were probably, a lot of them were astrologers, couldn't do it. So God was showing his ability to override them, that, Daniel would be able to have this information. So in the Bible, when they're dreams, they're given from God and an interpretation is provided. These are things God chooses to do. So with us trying to figure out dreams is basically a waste of time, because our dreams are really just regurgitating things from our brain that we've seen, we've heard, or maybe fears or anxieties we have. I mean, if you want to think about a dream you had, maybe because you think it'll help you understand your anxiety about something, that's fine. But there isn't some kind of special way to interpret dreams. It's not like, well, if you dream about, it's snowing, then that means this. Or if you dream you're on a boat, then that means this. There's no such thing as that. I mean, I know you can buy books that tell you that thing. I know, because I used to buy those books. And they don't mean anything. So we shouldn't be looking into our dreams or analyzing them unless we really think it's going to help us understand a personal problem. Once in a while, I have a very vivid dream and it gives me a certain kind of feeling. And if I think about it, I recognize it as familiar to something, either something that's happened to me or something that I'm concerned about. And then I realize the dream was about that particular issue. And that's really on my mind. And that's why I have that dream, and then I'll think, oh, that's why I dreamt that. I was really thinking about that the other day and I was really worried, and I'm still worried. So, sometimes you can recognize that kind of thing. But other than that, we shouldn't look for some kind of spiritual meaning. And there's nothing in the New Testament that indicates we should look at our dreams. And when it talks about the gifts of the Spirit, there's nothing there about dreams. There's nothing about having a dream or having somebody to interpret dreams. So there's no biblical basis for it. And I think it takes you into an area where you're going to get caught up in things that will possibly take you away from really the Lord, not like you're going to, if you're saved, you won't be saved, but it'll keep you from maturing as a Christian, or it'll keep you from really experiencing more knowledge of the Lord. Or it'll just confuse you. It'll cause spiritual confusion. As far as having dreams that come true, actually, there was a mathematics professor at the University of Maryland who did a very detailed statistical study. And it was in a newspaper article. And for many years, I had that article, and then somehow I lost it. And I tried to find online. I tried to find if I could find his name. And I've looked and looked. I've never been able to find it. He did a study. And because human beings can only dream about so many things, we tend to dream about certain things, and then those certain things are normal events in the world, and they just, statistically speaking, they'll match up. So he actually came up with a percentage of dreams that was a pretty high percentage of people who dream about something, and then it seems like what they dreamed about happened. But it's a coincidence because of statistics. And if you think about it, this has actually happened to me several times. And since I read that article, I'm glad I read the article because it helped me understand. Like, I would dream about a boat, and the next day I would hear on the news that this ferry, over in England or something, drowned, had an accident and all these people drowned. And I'll say, oh, I dreamt about this boat last night, or I dreamt about a boat on the stormy sea. Was I having a predictive dream? No. It was coincidence. A predictive dream would have been, I dreamt about the boat. I knew the name of the boat. I knew where it was, and I knew exactly what would happen. And I knew how many people were on board and how many people would drown. Now, if you get all of those details right, then you maybe can call it a predictive dream. But people have these kind of general dreams, and then something happens and they think it's a predictive dream, and it's most likely a coincidence. Because look at it this way, only God really knows the future. Nobody else. The only future we know about is what God tells us in the Bible. He does tell us some things. We don't know the specifics, but we know some things about the future, about, like, for example, the judgment. And then depending on your end times view, there's other things that you can see that you may think are predicted by God for the future, or the future of the church. But you don't have really the details. God doesn't give us real specific details. And God, of course, being outside of time, knows all of this as though it's already happened. There is no future for God, because that would mean God was in time and he's looking ahead, like a psychic or something. And of course, psychics don't know the future either. But everything's already happened for God, because he's outside of time. It's something that we really can't wrap our heads around. That is just a concept that blows my mind away every time I think about it. But I also find it very comforting, because I know that everything's already, with God, it's already planned out. God already knows everything. He already has it worked out. He's worked everything out for his glory. And for believers, he's worked everything out for our best, because he has our best. He works for our best because we are his creation in Christ, and we're adopted as sons and daughters of God. If you are a Christian and have trusted in Jesus, you are an adopted child. And so God cares for you. And what happens to you is God is allowing it or doing it for your best, for what he thinks is best for you, even if you don't think it's so hot, and that's usually the case. But God is forming us and conforming us into the image of Christ. So he will use different things for that. But God already has all that arranged. There's no way we can know the future. Now, would God tell somebody the future? Now, my own personal view is no, because I think that was already done with the prophets in the Old Testament. They gave prophecies of the Messiah. They gave prophecies of Israel. They gave prophecies of some of the judgments on some of the nations, the Gentile nations, the pagan countries. There's a prophecy on Babylon. It's a prophecy on the Philistines. And all of these things a lot of these prophecies in the Old Testament came true. They already came true. So we can see how these prophecies were fulfilled. And in the New Testament, when they have prophets, they aren't, except for the revelation of John, they aren't, and things like where they say people will turn away, there'll be a falling away before, the Antichrist comes and things like that. Except for things like that, there's not a lot of future telling. And it's more about giving the gospel and spreading the gospel and sharing the news of Christ and discipling believers and building the church and preparing the church as a bride for Jesus Christ. So that's what the focus is for us Christians. It's not to try to figure out the future. So I don't believe in predictive dreams. I think when it happens, people are applying a dream to a specific situation. Another thing also that happens is when something happens, people who had a dream will or they'll actually falsely remember having a dream of that thing happening. It's actually something that's known, that's happened. It's like, oh wow, I had a flat tire today and I dreamt last night that I had a flat tire, but I may not have really dreamt it, but I actually think I did, because our minds will play tricks like that. So I don't put much faith in predictive dreams. So that's a long answer. Sorry. That's kind of a hard topic to explain.
Anybody else have any other questions? All right. I guess really appreciate you coming on, and we were going to try to have this uploaded on our YouTube channel
Okay.
tonight or tomorrow, probably tonight. But real quick, you want to hit what are you going to talk about next week?
Yes. So next week, I'm going to talk about Wicca and witchcraft and a little bit of the history. The word, I'll talk again about how the word is not in the Hebrew. I'll talk about some of maybe my experiences or some of the Wiccans and witches, not individuals that I knew, but just, the witchcraft groups I knew of. And the beliefs. And I might, if I have time, I might try to show the distinction between that and the New Age. So I may talk a little bit about the difference in the witchcraft pagan view and the occult worldview, which isn't either always the same either, and the New Age worldview.
Okay.
Wonderful. So that people can see there are distinctions there.
Awesome. Well, that was a wealth of information, and I really appreciate it. And
thank you so much. I hope it was helpful.
I think it was really helpful.
Okay, good. And please email me, any of you there who have questions maybe you thought of later or that you didn't want to ask in front of anybody else. You can contact me on Facebook, or my email, which is not on Facebook, but I'll give you, is theexastrologer@gmail.com. I'm going to message it to Devin tonight on Facebook so that he has it. So you can give it to anybody who asks for it if they didn't get that, theexastrologer@gmail.com. Okay.
Give your website again one more time.
Christian Answers for the New Age.org, and I have a Facebook page, Christian Answers for the New Age.
Perfect.
Okay.
We shall see you next week, Marcia.
Okay, I look forward to it, you guys. Oh, by the way, Halloween is my birthday.
Oh, wow.
And it's my son's birthday too. So wow. I think that the Lord was really, he definitely arranged it that way for many reasons. Okay. Thanks a lot. Good night. See you next week.
Yep, we'll be here. Thank you. Yeah.